You ever watch a grown woman in a $600 0-cents dress faceplant into your vegetable patch like she just lost a wrestling match with gravity and gossip? Because that's exactly what happened to me. There was a crash, then a scream, then silence. That's how my HOA war started. Right in the middle of my lunch break, with a thud on the other side of my fence, and Teresa Klein, the HOA president, lying in my garden like a broken lawn ornament. 1 minute I'm watering tomatoes, the next there's a ladder sideways, a sandal in my basil, and Teresa flailing on the ground screaming something about bylaws and national security. She wasn't invited, and she wasn't supposed to be on the ladder, but there she was, sprawled out, pointing at me like I'd committed a felony by owning zucchini. Leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. If you're into real feeling stories with wild twists, poetic justice, and just the right dose of HOA madness, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story? Even crazier. And trust me, the kind of twist coming next? You won't want to miss it. My name is Graham Ellis, age 44, former cybersecurity contractor turned accidental suburban fugitive. On a Tuesday that was supposed to be about pruning tomatoes, not defending my lawn from an airborne HOA president, there I was, minding my own chlorophyll-based business, when I heard a crash so loud it made my sprinkler twitch. I peeked around my 6-foot cedar privacy fence, the one I'd built by the book, and there she was, Teresa Klein, HOA president, clipboard connoisseur, lying in my marigolds with her legs tangled in a ladder and her pride bleeding out beside her. She was pointing at me like I was the one who pushed her, screeching, "What are you hiding in there, Graham? That fence is too tall. You're violating Ordinance 3B. And I thought, Ordinance 3B? Lady, you just violated common sense and possibly the laws of aerodynamics. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't hate Teresa. I didn't even know her well enough to hate her. She was like a reality TV character I never asked to watch but kept showing up in reruns around the cul-de-sac. Her floral dress was hiked up past regulation decency, one sandal missing, the other hanging by a toe like it was rethinking its life choices. You built this fence to hide something, she spat, struggling to stand. Illegal modifications. Or maybe chickens. Don't think I haven't noticed the silence. It's too quiet back here. I took a deep breath, counted to 3 like my therapist once advised during a security breach in Bangalore, and said, Teresa, I have nothing to hide. This fence is exactly 6 feet tall, the max allowed under HOA rules, page 14, subsection B. I measured it myself with a laser, and what's behind it is not your business. It's vegetables, organic ones. She blinked like I'd just spoken Latin. I offered to call someone, paramedics, her chiropractor, maybe a counselor, but she muttered something I wasn't expecting. Without control, you lose everything. Now, that gave me pause. I'd heard a lot from Teresa over the past 3 years. Passive-aggressive meeting memos, HOA's newsletters with more threats than updates, even a fine for leaving my trash bin on the curb for 11 minutes too long. But that one line? That felt personal. And broken. She limped off, heels clicking unevenly against the pavement, still managing to toss over her shoulder, "Expect a notice. And don't delete anything from your security system, Graham. We'll be requesting access." I almost laughed. Requesting access? I built the security system for this entire neighborhood. That's not ego, that's fact. Back when I still worked full-time in cybersecurity, I designed the smart surveillance grid for Oak Haven Estates. Motion sensors, encrypted feeds, thermal perimeter detection. Then I semi-retired, bought a fixer-upper in Willow Glen and thought I'd garden in peace. But peace, apparently, isn't included in the HOA welcome pack. Back inside, I'd checked my home dashboard. Every sensor, every feed. There she was on playback, plain as a rerun. Teresa dragging a ladder from her trunk, propping it against my fence like she was storming a castle, and climbing up with the grace of a curious raccoon. She was clearly trying to peer over. This wasn't a neighborly concern, it was surveillance with a sundress. I saved the clip. I knew I'd need it. Out of habit, I widened the search field. Thermal and visual activity from the last 2 weeks, and that's when things got interesting. Teresa had been up to this before. Same ladder, same clipboard, different yards. 3 times in 1 week, peeking over people's fences like a nosy shepherd, watching over sheep she doesn't own. And always with that same tight smile. That's not policy enforcement, that's obsession. And if she thought I was going to be her next episode, she picked the wrong yard. I poured myself some iced tea, the irony not lost on me that she fell right next to my mint. As I sat down to document the incident, because with Teresa you document everything, I heard a knock on the door, and I swear I braced myself like I was in a courtroom. But it wasn't another citation or HOA goon squad. It was Margie Fields from across the street, retired nurse, notorious for making peanut butter cookies and knowing everyone's business in a way that somehow feels comforting. She handed me a plate of cookies and said, "I saw what happened. That woman's been a tick on this neighborhood for years. You okay?" I told her I was fine, and she just nodded. "Good, because she's poked the wrong bear this time." And she smiled like someone who had just seen Act 1 of a 3-act play and knew Act 2 was going to be wild. I looked down at the cookies, still warm, and thought, maybe I wouldn't need to fight this alone. Maybe this wasn't just my garden. Maybe it was ground zero. And maybe, just maybe, that ladder wasn't the last thing Teresa would fall from. The cookies were still warm, but the information Margie brought, scalding. She stood on my porch like a retired spy with a dessert tray, smiling like she just watched the queen of the HOA eat dirt and had the replay on loop in her head. "You got a minute, Graham?" she asked, as if the plate of peanut butter diplomacy didn't already guarantee my undivided attention. I waved her in, and within minutes we were sitting at my kitchen island, tea in hand, cookies on napkins, and gossip on full blast. "Teresa's been a thorn in this neighborhood since the minute she grabbed that HOA title like it was a crown," Margie said, dunking a cookie like it was her gavel. The way she said it, calm, casual, like she'd rehearsed it during water aerobics, made me realize I wasn't Teresa's first war, just the next one. "She wasn't always like this," Margie added, and suddenly her tone softened. "Her husband left her 3 years ago. Rumor is he said she reminded him too much of her mother, controlling, critical, impossible to please." I raised an eyebrow, not because I didn't believe it, but because that was the exact line Teresa had muttered under her breath as she limped off my lawn. "Without control, you lose everything." Those weren't just words. They were an inherited warning. Margie sipped her tea and leaned in. "Since then, she's tried to run Willow Glen like a boot camp for hedges and Mailbox Heights. Janelle, down the block, got a $200 0-cents fine last week for having wind chimes that violated auditory standards." She made air quotes so big they practically clapped. I chuckled, but it felt heavier than humor. This wasn't about rules. It was about one woman punishing the world for what she couldn't fix in herself. "Trevor's got stories too," Margie continued, barely pausing for breath. "You know, the handyman? She made him repaint her front porch. Twice. Said it was community visible property and therefore under HOA jurisdiction. Paid him with a coupon to the sandwich shop and a warning about future collaboration expectations." I stared at her, genuinely unsure if I should laugh or call a lawyer. "Why doesn't anyone push back?" I asked. Margie raised an eyebrow. "Because most folks around here just want peace. They're older, tired. They don't want to spend retirement arguing with a woman who files more paperwork than the IRS." I nodded slowly, understanding too well. Teresa wasn't just a bully. She was a bureaucratic landmine. And most people didn't have the bandwidth to diffuse her. But me? I had time. And data. Margie eventually headed home with a promise to keep the cookies coming and the info hotter, which I assumed was her version of a ceasefire pact. After she left, I stepped outside to clear my head, and that's when I noticed something on the streetlight directly across from my driveway. It was small, discreet, black casing, and definitely not there yesterday. I walked casually toward it, hands in pockets, like I was admiring the beauty of municipal lighting. From a distance, it looked like a camera. Up close, it confirmed my suspicion. It was a dummy sensor, but well made, convincing enough to rattle anyone who saw it. Except I'm not just anyone. I designed the actual system for Willow Glen surveillance. This wasn't part of it, which meant someone had placed it manually, which meant someone was trying to scare me. And if I had to bet who, I'd give you one guess and one clipboard. I went back inside, plugged into the neighborhood network, and pulled metadata from nearby sensors. Nothing on file for that fake unit, not connected to the system, just a shell installed for intimidation. I opened a secondary diagnostic tool and scanned for passive signals. That's when I saw it. The device was emitting a low-power Bluetooth ping every 30 seconds. Not just for show, it was recording. Not video. Audio. Suddenly, the cookies didn't taste so sweet. Teresa wasn't just watching. She was listening. Conversations on my porch, by my driveway, even out by the mailbox, were probably being logged and filed under Ellis Graham Subversive Vegetable Enthusiast. I leaned back in my chair, the kind of smile you get when someone finally crosses the line you drew. That fake sensor wasn't just a bluff. Is her declaration of war, and she had no idea that I just opened her first sealed file. Because next, I was going to open every single one. Did you ever find a blinking device outside your home and realize it's blinking at your soul? And that's what it felt like staring up at that fake sensor on the lamppost. It wasn't just plastic and paranoia, it was a message. A silent little reminder from Teresa Klein that she was watching. Not officially, of course. Nothing in the HOA charter about installing bootleg surveillance gear to intimidate residents, but subtlety's never been her strong suit. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I just smiled, walked back inside, and did what any self-respecting cybersecurity consultant would do. I started tracing its heartbeat, and the deeper I dug, the louder it got. Turned out the device wasn't just sending out Bluetooth pings. It was transmitting compressed audio bursts every 4 hours to an unregistered receiver. That's not HOA enforcement. That's espionage with a garden club budget. So I got to work, masked my IP, ran a frequency trace, and followed the trail. Within an hour, I found the data log on a server disguised as a landscaping invoice platform. Clever, but not clever enough. Inside, voice recordings from my front yard, from Janelle's sidewalk, from Trevor's tool shed, all sorted by street address like some demented neighborhood playlist. It wasn't just a camera, it was a stethoscope pressed to the chest of the whole block. And Teresa was listening for weakness. I cataloged every file, screenshot every entry, and started building a timeline. The worst part? Most folks had no idea they were being watched. These weren't ring cams or doorbell footage. They were passive directional microphones triggered by proximity and keyword alerts. I found an audio clip of Janelle quietly crying on her porch, telling her mom she couldn't afford the latest fine, something about her hedges being too bold. Teresa had labeled it Possible Defiance, Monitor. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to decide if I felt more sick or furious. Either way, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about everyone. And this time, I wasn't saving files. I was loading ammo. Later that evening, I walked over to Janelle's house. She opened the door with that look people have when they've been expecting another punch from the same direction. I told her I had something she needed to hear. She let me in. I didn't start with the surveillance. I started with the fines. The hedge violation, the triple threat letters, the vague language that made it sound like she was violating national security instead of growing boxwoods. And then I showed her the audio file, her own voice, recorded without her knowledge, filed like evidence. Janelle broke down right there at her dining room table, not because she was shocked, but because she wasn't. I knew she was watching, she said. I just didn't know she was listening. And that's when I realized Teresa didn't just find people. She cracked them open like nuts, looking for something she could use. I promised Janelle I'd handle it, that I had backups of the backups, that I wouldn't let Teresa bury it under HOA legalese. She nodded, still shaky, but grateful. But gratitude doesn't stop tyrants. And sure enough, the very next morning, every mailbox in the neighborhood had a bright red flyer stuffed inside, all caps, black font. Headlines made for panic. Alert! Suspected animal breeding activity, 42 Maple Drive, my address. Beneath it, a list of witnessed oddities, including unusual noises, chemical odors, and repeated movement near the back gate. You'd think I was running a black market zoo. No mention of evidence, no explanation, just enough weird phrasing to stir up every bored retiree within a 10-block radius. It was bold, it was sloppy, and it was war. Because if Teresa thought fake flyers were her nuclear option, she hadn't seen what happens when a quiet man with a real server decides to speak. I woke up to find out I was apparently running a zoo. Funny thing is, I don't even own a dog. But there it was in red bold print across my front gate. Suspected illegal animal breeding operation, 42 Maple Drive. There was even a clip art paw print on it, which felt more insulting than the accusation itself. Overnight, Teresa had turned my house into a neighborhood rumor magnet. My phone buzzed with texts, some curious, some cautious, all unwanted. And as I stepped outside, the stares from across the street were hard to miss. People I'd waved to for years were now pulling their dogs a little closer and avoiding eye contact, like I'd suddenly grown tusks. It's strange how quickly suspicion spreads when it's wrapped in a flyer and dipped in HOA authority. For a moment, just a moment, I considered putting the place on the market, selling, starting over somewhere where the only drama involved squirrels and lawnmowers. But then I thought, if I leave, who's next? Janelle? Trevor? Margie? People who don't know how to fight back, who don't have the receipts. I wasn't just the target, I was the test case, and Teresa was betting that shame would do her job for her. That's the thing about cowards in charge. They count on silence doing the heavy lifting. And if there's one thing I've learned from building secure networks, it's this. Silence is a vulnerability. So I grabbed my notes, pulled on a hoodie, and went to see Trevor. Trevor's the kind of guy who fixes things before you know they're broken. Quiet, keeps to himself, but I found him behind his garage sanding a piece of wood that looked like it'd been cursed. When I told him what happened, he just nodded, like he'd been expecting this part of the movie. She made me repaint her porch, he muttered, said it was community evil, and that made it her right, told me to do it for free as part of HOA goodwill. I didn't even have a say. Then he glanced over his shoulder. She's been forging violation slips. Not all of them, just the ones she wants to enforce. The rest, never signed by the board. That landed like a punch disguised as a whisper. I asked if he had proof. He looked me square in the eye and said, I don't. But you strike me as the guy who will. Back at my place, I was halfway through organizing my documentation when there was a knock at the door. It was Margie and Janelle. Shoulder to shoulder, expressions locked somewhere between concern and indignation. Margie went first. We heard about the zoo, she deadpanned. Should we bring biscuits or backup? Janelle cut in, her voice low but steady. I'm done being scared of her. I checked my violation notice for the hedges. No board signatures, just hers. I looked up the bylaws. That makes it invalid. I stared at them. Two women who'd been pushed around for too long, now standing on my porch like a support group for the HO wrong. We're with you, Margie added. Whatever you're doing, don't do it alone. It wasn't a battle cry, but it didn't have to be. It was enough. And just as I was feeling that flicker of momentum, like maybe the tide was turning, I heard the unmistakable metallic clink of a ladder outside. Again, I opened the side window just in time to see Teresa, in full HOA camouflage, khakis, polo shirt, clipboard holstered like a weapon, dragging a camera bag behind her and setting up shop against my back fence. She was climbing. Again. I started recording. Again, but this time, something was different. She reached the top, camera in hand, ready to catch whatever imaginary felony she believed I was hiding behind the basil, and then the ladder shifted. Gravel. Bad footing. Karma. She let out a yelp, flailed, and toppled. Hard. The camera clattered, the clipboard flew, and Teresa? She landed with a thud that echoed like an exclamation mark. For a moment I froze, and I whispered to myself, "You really should learn from the first fall." Teresa said I booby-trapped my backyard. If I had that kind of energy, I'd trap squirrels, not HOA presidents. But that was the headline in the civil suit she filed 2 days after her second fall, claimed I'd maliciously destabilized the ground near the perimeter to cause intentional harm. She even threw in emotional distress, medical bills, and, get this, intentional visual trauma. 50 grand, that was the magic number. According to her attorney, I had created an unsafe environment incompatible with community standards. According to me, she fell off a ladder she brought herself while trespassing with a camera. But logic never stood a chance against theatrics, and when the court date came, Teresa showed up in a wheelchair with her leg in a cast and a neck brace that hadn't been there the day before. Her attorney, a man whose suit was more expensive than his ethics, called me a digital manipulator, claimed I had the tech skills to fake video, scrub metadata, and fabricate timelines, said I was antisocial, aggressive, and, my personal favorite, dangerously obsessed with privacy. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. Because I had something better than snark. I had receipts. When it was my turn, my lawyer, Martina Rodriguez, laid it out with the calm precision of a surgeon. Surveillance footage from both ladder incidents, timestamps, GPS logs, and yes, the digital integrity certificate that confirmed nothing had been altered. The courtroom watched in full silence as the video played. Teresa climbing the ladder, losing her balance and falling. No booby traps, no sabotage, just bad footing and worse judgment. And then Martina said the line that cracked the air. They came for his fence and uncovered their fraud. But the real twist came next. Teresa's team submitted a witness video showing her supposedly on public property when the fall occurred. Different angle, lower resolution, and just one tiny issue. The shadows didn't match the timestamp. Martina requested a forensic analysis. Turns out the footage had been edited. Sloppily. You could see glitches where the ladder was spliced into a sidewalk scene. Even the compression signature was inconsistent. The judge didn't look amused. He asked how they acquired the footage. The attorney shrugged, said it came from an anonymous neighbor, but just before recess, Trevor slipped me a USB. "You'll want this," he whispered. "It's from the HOA financial system, hidden access logs. She's been funneling money, probably paid for the fake video." I nodded, the pieces locking into place like gears in a trap Teresa had set for herself. Back in session, we presented the logs. Teresa had withdrawn HOA funds in cash, twice, without board approval. The same week the altered video was created. When questioned, she claimed it was for legal emergencies, but the judge had seen enough. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. The perjury flag was raised, and the judge referred the matter to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. Teresa's face went white. Not the kind of pale that says you lost a round, the kind that says you just realized you brought a fork to a gunfight. She didn't wait for the gavel. She bolted from the room like a contestant who just realized their name was on the wrong envelope. 3 hours later, I got a text from Martina. She ran. Teresa was caught checking into a roadside motel 30 miles out, traveling under her maiden name. They found $9,200.00 in her suitcase, a burner phone, and a file folder of HOA documents, some real, some forged. The woman who fined people for mismatched patio cushions had packed for exile like a disgraced empress on the run, and just like that, the neighborhood tyrant who once ruled by clipboard and passive aggression had become a criminal, fleeing a community she couldn't control anymore. But what none of us knew, at least not yet, was just how deep her need for power went. Because while we were still processing the lawsuit fallout, the real storm was quietly waiting behind a locked drawer and a missing ledger. There she was. Teresa the Terrible, sitting in a wheelchair at the center of the community green, signing autographs on her cast like it was royalty, and this was her farewell tour. Her leg was elevated, her sunglasses oversized, and she gave the kind of tight-lipped smile you'd see on someone who'd just lost a lawsuit but still wanted to look like the victim. The police cruiser idled nearby. 2 officers stood to the side, arms crossed, waiting for her to read the court-mandated apology like it was a school essay written under protest. A few neighbors clapped politely. Most didn't bother. The air felt like the moment after a thunderstorm, charged, humid, and oddly quiet. But me? I just stood at the edge of the grass, watching her one-woman monarchy collapse in real time. And I'll be honest, it was weirdly peaceful. The apology was about as heartfelt as a voicemail from your cable company. I, Teresa Klein, as part of my plea agreement, apologize for any actions that may have been misinterpreted as inappropriate during my time as HOA president. That line alone got a few eye rolls. When she got to my name, she paused, then forced it out like sour milk. I apologized to Graham Ellis for my accusations. She didn't admit fault. She never would. But her voice cracked just slightly at the end, and for a flicker of a moment I thought she might actually feel something close to regret. Then she wheeled herself back toward the cruiser without waiting for applause. The officers helped her in, and just like that, the clipboard queen of Willow Glen was off to answer for embezzlement, illegal surveillance, perjury, and about 6 other charges that had been stacking like HOA citations in a forgotten mailbox. What broke the whole thing open wasn't just her fall, or the fake video, or the missing funds. It was what they found in her house. A filing cabinet full of personal dossiers on half the neighborhood, bank statements, medical records, notes like, Trevor, behind on mortgage, or Janelle, custody dispute last year. She didn't just enforce rules, she mined people's lives for leverage. She ruled like a queen with a clipboard, but forgot that kings build systems. And systems? They keep receipts. The investigator said it looked like she'd been compiling blackmail material for years, all under the guise of HOA compliance. One officer described it as a neighborhood database with dictatorial ambitions. I described it as deeply pathetic, but also devastatingly effective. Until now. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. The energy in the room felt different, like a congregation after the cult leader's been caught embezzling. Howard Simmons, a retired judge, was appointed interim president. He asked me, the fence guy, to become the neighborhood's tech advisor. I laughed. Then I said yes, because if I've learned anything, it's that privacy doesn't defend itself, and someone has to guard the gates from the next clipboard crusader. My first official act? Changing the name of the neighborhood Wi-Fi from Willow Glen, HOA, to No Ladders Allowed. It made people laugh. And more importantly, it reminded them that the kingdom had fallen. The second act? Setting up transparent digital logs for violations, fund usage, and board votes. No more backdoor penalties or magical fines. From now on, if someone got flagged for weeds, it'd be visible, verifiable, and approved by actual adults. As for me, I didn't press charges. I didn't sue for damages. I didn't need to. Teresa had already lost the thing she valued most: control. Letting her twist in the legal wind, knowing she couldn't command a committee or manipulate a neighbor ever again, that was enough. But I did install one final reminder outside my fence, a small wooden sign, laser-cut and nailed with care. It reads, "Private area, no ladders allowed." People took photos with it. It became a bit of local folklore, and every time I see it, I smile, not because I won, but because I stayed. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't a courtroom, or a headline, or even an apology. Sometimes the best revenge is not moving. It's making them. I didn't move. I didn't run. I didn't let fear, or flyers, decide my story. I stayed. And somehow, in standing still, I helped an entire neighborhood move forward. What started as a battle over a fence turned into something bigger. A fight for dignity, transparency, and the right to live without fear of someone weaponizing a clipboard. We all want peace, right? But sometimes, to protect peace, You have to confront the petty tyrants who hide behind paperwork and smile like they're doing you a favor. And here's the thing. I didn't win because I fought dirty. I won because I documented. I stayed calm. I stood up when it mattered, and I didn't let someone else define the narrative. So if there's a message in this story, one worth more than every fine Teresa ever wrote, it's this. Don't underestimate quiet people with receipts. And don't let small power go unchecked, because when neighbors stick together and the truth shows up on video with a timestamp, the throne crumbles. Every time. If this story made you think, smile, or shake your head in knowing frustration, drop a comment below, let us know where you're watching from. Have you ever had your own run-in with HOA drama? Tell us, we read every story. And if you believe in justice, community, and well-earned revenge, with a little humor on top, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't miss what's coming next. Because the next story, let's just say, someone's mailbox goes missing, and what we find inside it rewrites the entire neighborhood. See you then.